Well, hello, sports fans. Larry Eder with RunBlogRun, and our premier European writer, Stuart Weir. Actually, one time I said he was in Scotland. He's really in England, but I messed that up for years. And this is the premiere of RunBlogRun Athletic Chat. Hello, Stuart.
Hey, Larry. Great to see you.
Good to see you, too. So what we're going to do is, like once a week, we're going to come up with topics and solve all the world's athletic problems. I thought we'd start out with saying some things about Neil Black, the late UK former performance director. And you knew him pretty well. How did he treat you on the road?
Always extremely well. We had this joke going that he said he always worried if he went somewhere and I wasn't the first person he bumped into. I mean, in terms of European or British writers, I'm quite low in the pecking order if you go on circulation, and because I'm not with a national newspaper and so on. But for Neil, that never made any difference. If I was there, he was always happy to talk to me. Mm-hmm. It was a great shame that he died. And of course, that he had actually left British athletics in, I think, unfortunate circumstances just a few months prior to that.
Most of the media organizations said that he left because the medal numbers were down. How big of a issue are medals with UK athletics and in the British athletics media circles?
Well, it's not so much the media, but because because our government gives money to Olympic sports in order for them to beat these terrible Americans and win as many medals as we can.
Sure.
That is why medal targets are important. Mm-hmm. And because you've got whatever number, 20 Olympic sports all vying for the money, medal targets are set. And basically, if swimming does badly, then perhaps athletics will get more money and swimming will get less money. So in that sense, targets are important. But I mean, you and I were both in Doha.
Sure.
And if you remember the women's 4x400 relay, when Jamaica finished third and Britain finished fourth, then Jamaica were disqualified and suddenly Britain had a medal.
Yeah.
5 minutes later, Jamaica were reinstated and Britain lost the medal.
Yeah.
And in a way, differences like that determine whether you meet a medal target or not. And if I go back to 20 years, there was a British performance director who lost his job because he had not met his medal target.
Yeah.
But today he has met the medal target because Russians who won medals against British athletes have now been disqualified and British athletes have been moved up. So it's a very, I understand why you have to do it, but it's quite unsatisfactory and the margins are incredibly small.
Sure. Oh, I remember Charles Van Comeny resigning after 2012.
Yes.
Even though I thought British athletics did an amazingly well. He said we hadn't met the targets. And, I still wonder if he just had enough of dealing with what he was dealing with and wanted to go to a place where he could, flex his muscle a little bit.
Yeah.
But, I do think that if you look at the three key stories in athletics over the last 10 to 12 years, the resurrection of British athletics is one of the big ones. The rise in China, and especially in their technical events, is another. And we'll leave the other for other discussions. But the other thing is we had a little announcement last week about, I'm going to say a couple things about Neil. One, he was always kind to me. I was lucky enough to see him in unguarded moments, laughing with Mo Farah. He always got the athletes to laugh. And he seemed to me to be a man with a gentle hand, a very fine would you call him a masseuse or would you call him a therapist? What's the?
He was by profession. He was a what we call a physiotherapist. You call a physical therapist.
A physio, okay.
And he actually started working for British Athletics in that role, and then transitioned into being the performance director. But he continued to be the only person that Mo Farah would trust.
Wow.
And I mean, even as recently as Chicago, Mo flew him over for the Chicago Marathon so that he could be the one who would have him in perfect condition for the race.
Yeah, no. Mo gave him an incredible tribute on Instagram when Neil surprisingly passed away. That was a hard one for people to take, and I think he's going to be sorely missed. He was a good man in a complicated sports situation, and I think UK athletics is going to get a little more complicated over the next few months. Our next topic of conversation today is this upcoming schedule. It's somewhere between 12 and 14 events. Stuart, what do you think about this schedule? Do you think it can even happen?
No.
Okay. Why do you think that?
Well, I spoke to the new chief executive of UK Athletics last week, and one of the events coming up is it used to be the Birmingham Diamond League, but the Birmingham Stadium is now out of commission because they're revamping it for the Commonwealth Games in 2022, and so it's gone to Gateshead. So I said to her, will the event take place if there are no spectators? And she just instantly said no. The moment we're having soccer being about to being played, but with no spectators allowed. But she said that's not a viable option because they do not have, athletics does not have the television contracts which would make it economically viable. So unless our government has relaxed the restrictions on spectators, and at the moment, in the UK, as of today, I am only allowed to meet one person outside of my house. Only one person I do not live with am I allowed to meet at a time. So therefore, we're light years away from being able to say, yes, you can have 20,000 people sitting next to each other. The government is also about to introduce regulation saying that if you come into the UK, or if a UK national leaves the country and returns, they must self-isolate for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So therefore, I mean, if you imagine an athlete wanting to come and compete in Gateshead, an American athlete, they have to arrive 2 weeks before the meet.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, and
so those regulations mean I think very few of any of these are going to take place. I mean, they recently cancelled the European Championship in Paris the last week in August. Yet
we lost Stuart. Stuart was talking about how hard it's going to be to travel to European meets, especially for Americans. Heck, it's hard to travel around the U.S. right now. I'm in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, which is 40 miles from Madison and 41 miles from Milwaukee. And we're in a county that has about 500 cases of coronavirus positives and 2 deaths. It's a small county, and the density of people is very, very small. Since last week, and the lovely Wisconsin Supreme Court overthrowing Governor Evers' safe haven, I do my 2 walks a day, and in the evening I'm walking by and bars are open for the first time in 8 weeks, and there's 50 or 60 people in there. And I'm not going to tell kids how to live their lives, but there sure wasn't social distancing. I'm flying out to California in 2 weeks, and I'm concerned about flying. There won't be anybody in the airports, and there's few people on planes, and I'll have a mask on. And when I get to California, I'll be in one of the 7 counties that's at the forefront of lockdowns and quarantines and all that happy horse stuff. But How are we going to do meets? I don't know. My feeling is I wish that the World Athletics Organization would have said, yeah, we'd love to do 8 Diamond League meets this year, but we're going to do 4 and we're going to do them well. And we're going to pick the places and the time because there's other things going on too. How have athletes been able to train? How many people are going to watch a 5K in 15 minutes or a 24-foot long jump or a 20-meter shot put? Now, athletics is always exciting, and I think people are going crazy right now. The Ultimate Garden clashes that have happened have been fantastic. But what's going to happen with this thing? Are we going to get chastised because we tried 12 events and 4 are going to go? It actually shows one of the issues I think that athletics always has, which is we try to do too many things. I think it would be better to do this year 3 or 4 meets and do some weird distances and do some handicapped races and stuff like that where, you take a top athlete and they do 400 meters and you have a kid in another lane, safe distance, doing 250 meters, and you have a masters runner, safe distance, another thing, doing 200 meters, and you keep it fun and competitive and you keep it safe. This is going to call for some creativity. There's a lot of creative people in the sport. But it seems like sometimes the same people get asked everything, and that's the challenge right now. Our next topic was going to be kind of what Stuart alluded to, and our friend Stuart, by the wonders of technology, we're going to try to get him back, but we haven't seen him return yet. But our topic 3 for today was going to be travel in the time of the coronavirus. For me to go from the U.S. to Europe, which is what I typically do during the summer, the way it works for me is for the last 15 years, April was London and Boston, and a couple years Paris. May was started with Doha, and then I started hitting the Prix, and then I'd head over to Europe, and I'd be in Europe for 3 weeks. And then I'd take a break and go to some more meets. And, a lot of times got to be like in 2014 and 15, I'd spend 5 or 6 weeks over there because it was a lot easier on my health to hang out there than to jump back and forth flying. Well, now the way it works, if I fly into the UK, I've got to self-quarantine for 14 days. Each country in Europe is going to have a little different coronavirus protocols. Will we be able to get from country to country? I don't know. The Czech Republic, for example, is going to have 165 meets. And they're starting that June 1st. But at each one of those meets, they can't have more than 100 people. So it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to do that. I think our friend Stuart is coming back on. We're keeping our fingers crossed. Stuart, are you there? But, I'd be curious to see those events in the Czech Republic. They've got stadiums all over the country, and they've got 165 events planned starting June 1st. And some of their top athletes, Pavel Mazlak, Bobora Spadakova, they're all going to be competing in the Czech Republic. But going from country to country, that's going to be the tough one, Stuart. I don't know how many places we're going to be able to go to this year.
I think you're right. I think travel is going to be the problem. And I suspect that Britain is not going to be the only country which is going to restrict people coming in because of the danger of them bringing the virus. Because, we've had 35,000 people die, and that's a horrendous number. So everyone has certainly taken it quite seriously here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's different in the U.S. I was telling our listeners and viewers that since the middle of last week, my state, Wisconsin, the Supreme Court threw out the May 26th safe haven or lockdown. And so I walk in the evenings, and I walk past a few bars, and since Wednesday night, they were full each night. But also since Wednesday night, the numbers of coronavirus cases in the state of Wisconsin have gone up 22% to 23% a night. And it's scary. And so what that's telling you is that people are playing with fire. The states of New York and the states of California, and I'm going out to California in 2 weeks, are the ones that are taking it the most seriously. But we've got people who believe that it's a, communist plot, that the aliens brought it in. I mean, when you have 38% of Americans that believe that Elvis is still alive, you've got an audience that is fascinated with conspiracies. And it's, I thought that, to me, this is very real. I've had heart surgery and dealt with thyroid cancer. So I'm the poster child for someone who has to watch for these things. And as you know, for the last 10, 12 years, most of my summers I'd see you at media events when the British meets or in some of the European meets, which is some of our favorite things to do. Why do you think that athletics in the UK is still so popular, even with the major newspapers? And I know there's challenges for it, for all of them, but it seems like when we go to meets and there's a presser, especially with British athletics, you and I are few of the independents. Most of it is the big newspaper guys or the big TV guys.
Yeah, it's a strange picture because the newspapers cover it within the UK. But, I mean, when I started going to Diamond Leagues, perhaps 6 or 7 years ago, there used to be 5 British writers, 5 national newspapers sending a writer to Rome, for example. Now there's never anyone but me.
Wow.
And that's partly just because the challenges of the newspaper industry, that people no longer buy a daily newspaper the way they used to. The generation below us does it all online. And also, not only do they read it online, but of course, these days, you don't actually need to be at the event because it's all streamed, screened, and you can even get the interviews with athletes without being there. So I think that's part of it. And I think if you compare soccer with any other sport, soccer gets 10 times as much money, publicity as any other sport. And I mean, I think that athletics is very big on the Olympics, World Championships. It's also got a very popular participative sport in terms of the number of people who run. I mean, the park runs have really taken off.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic program.
And just how many people have run marathons. So there's that element to it. But it's certainly true that for a Diamond League in London, you'll get 30,000 on both days, which sometimes people say that doesn't look a lot because it doesn't fill the stadium. But then you see, if you compare that with places like Stockholm or Oslo or Monaco, the stadium may be full, but it only holds 10, 15, 20,000, whereas Britain is getting 60,000 over the 2 days.
No, it's pretty impressive. I mean, I've been to the London Grand Prix since 2006. I've been rather disappointed the last couple years, especially when you had a different leadership with UK Athletics when they did that Athletics Cup event. The rumor was that UK lost somewhere between $1 and $2 million, and they emasculated the London Grand Prix meet. And now this year, the London GP meet won't even happen because the way that I understand it, and Stuart, correct me if I'm wrong, that UK Athletics only has use of that stadium for about a 6-week time period because the football club that owns that place has it the rest of the year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That was part of the deal. I'm terribly amused, Larry. I'm terribly amused that I'm calling it soccer and you're calling it football. We're being so cross-cultural.
Well, it's funny. My first sport was your football, which we called soccer here. My neighbor was Cuban and German, and I remember I started playing in '66, and so I got to see black and white movies of Pelé, and I was raised in St. Louis, which was a real hotbed of soccer. St. Louis University was a huge American, soccer football program. And then when I was in college, I hung out with a bunch of footballers from Ireland and South Africa who were playing at University of Santa Clara. And that's how I got my first Adidas kit. I still have the old Birkenbauer sweats from back then, collector's items. But we thought that stuff was so cool,
Great. But just going back to the stadium,
sure.
You see, the Olympic Stadium, which was a new stadium built for the Olympics, then you have the issue, what do you do with it? How do you find a new life for it so that it doesn't just sit there used 3 or 4 times a year? And part of the solution was to allow the West Ham United Football Club to use it.
Sure.
And for our football, we really like the fans to be close to the action. So having the running track between the pitch, the field, and the spectators would be very unpopular here because people would say we're too far away. Okay. So therefore, when athletics is finished, they put seats over the track.
Wow.
So it's not a situation where you can have athletics one day and soccer the next day.
Okay.
You actually make structural changes for that 6-week period.
Wow.
And so when it was deemed not safe for the anniversary games to go ahead in July, there was no possibility of postponing it into August because that is outside the window. Sure. Frankly, I have doubts whether it could have gone ahead in August anyway, because, our Premier League soccer is actually saying that they may well be playing without spectators for the next year.
Now, when our lovely little broadcast went off, you were talking about something that I wanted to go over. You were talking about the European Championships, which I was looking forward to going to, and which I will say unequivocally is one of my favorite events every 2 years. European indoor, European outdoor are fantastic events. And they always pick great cities, but it was supposed to be in Paris at Stade Charlotte. Yes. And they've canceled it. Yet, as you said, there's going to be a Diamond League meet about 2 weeks after they plan the European Champs. What do you think of that?
I can't see how it can take place because France has lost again large numbers of people, probably in the region of 20,000, and they have had the same kind of strict, at times stricter lockdown than we've had. That actually in France, for a period, you had to have filled in a form before you could leave your house so that the police could check where you were going and what you were doing.
Yes.
So I think it's, again, going back to my conversation with the CEO of UK Athletics, sure. She said to me, we waited until the last minute before we cancelled the anniversary games until the government told us there was no possibility of having it the way we want to have it. And she said, we're doing the same with our national championship and with the Gateshead Diamond League, that we're going to, they're on the schedule until the government tells us no such events can take place. But they recognize that that's a real possibility.
But in France, what did France say? Isn't it like they can't do an event? Well, in Berlin, they can't do an event with more than 5,000 people. So if they're going to even do a marathon, it'll be elite. Hell, they canceled the Oktoberfest. the sign of the end times in Germany.
Well, the London Marathon is scheduled for October.
Okay.
But again, whether that can take place, I think they could probably do an elite-only race.
Mm-hmm.
But who would want to do that? Because the whole character of the London Marathon is the crowds and the crowds of spectators and all the money that is raised for good causes.
Yeah. No, I think there's going to be fundamental change in feel in the various events. I mean, the London Marathon, and I've gone to all the majors except Tokyo, and London is my favorite. And, you know, the moment that I loved was when Bedford would get up there mischievously and say, "Welcome to the world's greatest marathon," and he had the New York City Marathon people and Chicago people grinning and standing next to him. You know, it was that little bit of competitiveness, and we love that. And the Diamond League meets in a lot of ways were the same way. I mean, Birmingham did a fantastic event in a great crowd.
Yes.
And I was looking forward to Gateshead. I've been up to Newcastle for the half marathon, but I would love to see an athletic meeting up there. But I'm a little miffed with Sir or Lord Coe, and I'll bring this up in the New Delhi Times yesterday. And congratulations to Seb for being everywhere in the media. He has been out there promoting the sport, and that's what he's supposed to do. His predecessor did not do that. And so, hats are off to Seb. But what I didn't like is what he said was that at a certain point, he's got to make some decisions. And if that means going against the local pandemic controls, sports may have to do that. And I'm just kind of going, what planet is he on? You know, he sounds like, Seb is the leader of the sport, and I know he must be frustrated. And I know the coffers are quite bare. And I think what he's done with the Ultimate Garden Clash events, I watched both of them and was enthralled. And I watched the social media, and people young and old love those events, Stuart. They just, and the LaVillenay and Mondo and Sam were perfect. And the young women, Alicia Newman, Katerina Stefanidi, and Katie Najia, they were all so much fun, and they were exhausted. And you're kind of going, wow, 30 vaults in 30 minutes? That's insane. And for Stefanidi, it was 39 degrees in Greece. I don't even know how they had to keep the camera that they were taking the video with. It was encased in ice. Yeah. It was so hot. And those things were all fun. So could we do a shot put? I mean, I thought of, well, why couldn't we do a mile like that? Put Nick Willis in New Zealand, someone in the U.S., someone in Europe, and say, okay, guys, we're all starting at the same time. See how fast you could go. It's not the way we want it, but let's do the best we can, Yeah. I think we got to be careful, and we got to be respectful. And I respect Seb's enthusiasm, and I think that was more of an enthusiastic comment. But you also see how frustrated leaders of sport must be. But people are dying right now, Oh
yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And we got to be careful, and that's the thing. If you were the head of World Athletics for a day, what kind of things would you do to keep people interested in the sport right now? Can you think of something that you would like to see happen?
I mean, I think at the moment, a very difficult moment to answer that question, because all the things that you'd like to do, it's just not possible to until the pandemic is gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not convinced that the way to take a sport forward is to get rid of triple jump and the other events that have been taken out of the diamond leagues, because first of all, you make it very difficult for those athletes to earn a living.
Sure.
And also, those of us who are old enough to remember Jonathan Edwards breaking the world record twice in half an hour in 1995, I mean, that was riveting to watch.
Yeah, I was on that track, and that was one of the most exciting things I've ever seen in my life. And he was so relaxed. He was in a zone.
Yeah.
And that's one of the fascinating things about the sport, is seeing athletes when they're in the zone, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, again, to see Christian Taylor going against Pablo, or even against Will Clay on occasions.
Sure.
It's exciting. But I mean, if you insist in putting this on at a Diamond League an hour before anyone arrives, and you don't give it any publicity, then, well, it's not very exciting. But I don't think it's the fault of the event.
No.
I think that I would like to see the traditional disciplines retained and packaged in a way that is exciting. I mean, you mentioned the World Cup in London, which was a financial disaster. Mm-hmm. But one thing that they did well there was that the first event in the program was always a field event, and they had nothing else. And the stadium announcer described to everyone what was happening.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I've written a lot about triple jump over the years, and it always seems to be in the far corner of the stadium, from where you're sitting, and there's no information about it. Yeah. So, well, it is difficult for the spectators to know what's happening and who's winning and what jump it is and all of that. But I mean, I just think that you can do that. You can, if you just make the effort to have someone describing it, explaining what it is. I mean, I'm probably quite traditional, so I would have no radical changes, but I just think to do what we do and to do it better.
I recall about 1998 or 99, a meet in Portland called the Adidas Oregon Classic, and they'd get 4,000 or 5,000 people tops. But what they did well was Paul Banta, the meet director at the time, featured the shot put, and he brought in the best at the time, just amazing athletes. And there was about 1,000 fans watching it, and the announcer was into it, and they were throwing 21, 50, some big throws. John Godina was there. I mean, I loved watching John. And the kids got into it, and it just told me, oh my gosh, what can we do with the sport? And those are the kind of things, a little bit of creativity goes a long way. And we're down to a little under 5 minutes, Stuart. And so we've talked about Neil Black and how much we admired him and how much we're going to miss him. We've talked about the schedule this year, and we're wondering how much of it's going to come off. We've talked a bit about traveling the time of coronavirus. We've talked about the needs to juggle the traditional and being creative. Our final 3 minutes or so. So the Tokyo Olympics was moved to 2021. And the way that we're hearing everything now is that there'll be another outbreak of this coronavirus, perhaps in the late fall, and something in 2021. Mm-hmm. Are we going to see the Olympics in 2021 or 2024? What do you think?
I think the 2021 will only happen if there's a vaccine.
Okay. I tend to. I just don't understand how. Let's just take the numbers for a minute. There'll be 10,000 athletes in Tokyo from all over the world, 209 countries.
Yep.
There will be 11,000 media. Yep, you got it, sports fans. 11,000 media. About 8,000 of them involved in television, because print and digital media, we get a presence, but it's a challenge for us to get there. To travel to Japan, it'll be the most expensive Olympics of the 10 that I've gone to, and the average cost is going to be somewhere around $10,000. They're trying to move hotels to 2021. They still haven't gotten that worked out. And in Japan, they're having coronavirus outbreaks right now, so they don't have it in control. How can they let us come in from all over the world? You know?
Well, somebody said if you wanted to spread the virus faster, stronger, and higher, that to bring together, as you say, 15,000 people from 2009 countries and have them eating together, living together, you can't think of a better way of doing it.
It's just craziness, And
Stuart, even if Japan has managed to deal with it by then, the fact that you're bringing in people from literally every country in the world, it just gives it's the way you would do it if you wanted a further outbreak. So unless there's a vaccine, I just can't see how it can happen.
Stuart, I think you're correct. And with this, we will end our first athletics chat. We'll do one next Monday again. Stuart, thank you again. I've missed seeing you on the road. And thank you for putting up with my questions today and talking about soccer and football and athletics. Have a great week. All right, cheers.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Bye now.
Bye.
Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder. This is the epilogue of our first athletic chat. We're going to be doing this on Mondays with Stuart Weir. Stuart is our European British correspondent. He's charming. He's thoughtful. He laughs at my jokes. But most of all, the guy gets track and field. And he goes to 15 to 20 events a year and writes somewhere around 150 columns for us. And the athletes love him because he's just a gentle soul. And he's a keen observer, and he's got a fun sense of humor. And I think he's got great insights into the sport. He's one of those people that I met on the road. I think we were in Manchester walking back from a presser for one of the, perhaps the Manchester half, or Manchester 10K. I liked him, thought he had some great ideas, and asked him to start writing for us. And that was back in about 2013 or 14, I believe. But what we're going to do is once a week, Stu and I are going to cover 4 topics, 30 minutes, try to solve the athletic problems of the world. And I will deal with the politics. Stu does not like to deal with politics. He finds it a little unseemly. But I'll deal with sport politics. And Stu will deal with all his other observations. But the man's been in every major stadium. And right now, we've got enough things going on with the coronavirus and how to bring the sport back, which is going to take time. It's not something you can do overnight. I was alluding to Seb Coe, the CEO of World Athletics, formerly IAAF, who's been speaking to the media just prolifically the last several weeks, and I applaud him for that. Seb's always great for a quote, great story, thoughtful. You think you're the only person that matters when you talk to him. That's what a great politician, a great sports politician, a great leader does. My frustration was that I think we saw a little bit of Seb's frustration, and just a little bit of it, because the man plays being a leader like a very good poker player. I wouldn't want to play poker against him. He admitted that leaders are going to have to make decisions on what's best for their sports and their athletes, and that may coincide with challenging local pandemic rules. I didn't like that when I heard that. It scares me, because in the U.S. right now, I'm dealing with a whole bunch of knuckleheads who think that there's everything from aliens brought the pandemic to us to communists brought the pandemic to us. And I'm not sure who brought it. I think it's nature saying, hey, you can't control everything. Listen to the scientists. But we politicize scientists too, which I don't understand. As the poster child, one of the poster children for people who can get the coronavirus, since I have 3 stints, I've dealt with thyroid cancer, and I've got a thing called sarcoidosis. I got to be careful. And I'm traveling in a couple of weeks, and I'm a little scared about that. Got to deal with some things in California for the family. So that is a challenge. But we all have challenges in this modern day. What do I ask you to do? Wash your hands for 20 seconds several times a day. Wear a mask when you go out. Exercise. Do something to clear your head. Read, like books and things. Listen to radio. Find a Netflix thing that you like. I'm several that I'm into. But this is going to go on for another 18 months, off and on. And we've got to be careful. Mother Nature is telling us, don't get too arrogant. Just because you've got a Tesla doesn't mean you're not going to get sick. So be careful. So that's Larry's epistle for today. Send us some emails at runblogrun@gmail.com and tell us what you think of this lovely new chapter in Run Blog Run podcasting. And thank you to Mike Deering of the Shoe Addicts, who has a lovely beard and just an amazing head of hair right now, thanks to the coronavirus. He could be in the Pet Shop Boys right now, you know. The mustache, though, looks a little porn. Anyway, thanks to Mike Deering and my son Adam for suggesting these things. And we're going to continue to innovate. So watch for new things. Larry Eder signing out. Stay healthy. Love your family and your friends. Make sure they know you care about them. And get out there and exercise. Run or walk, but do it safely and within your local rules. They're there for a reason. Larry Eder signing out.